Good morning, all. Thank you so much for joining Darien Library this morning for building a spring floral arrangement with Jaime from the Gardner Center right across the street, a floral designer with more than 20 years experience, in addition to her own very impressive creativity. This morning, Jaime's going to be joined by Elizabeth, who's our head of public services, working right alongside her. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that programs at Darien Library are made possible by the annual Friends of the Library campaign. We thank you for your support to make programs like this, as well as our collections, available to the community. I hope everyone's ready to be inspired. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jaime now.
Thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining me again. If some of you are repeat offenders. No, thank you. I'm so happy you're here with us. So today we're just going to chat everything spring flowers, cut flowers, and the cut flower world. Then maybe talk about some spring color paletting. And then Elizabeth and I are going to make a couple things. So yay! I think after the year we've had, that spring is always, no matter what precedes it, spring is always sort of that hope eternal. You start seeing those tulips and those daffodils pop up, you see the color, and it's a breath of fresh air. It feels so nice, and we are really lucky to live in this area of the world where we get to experience the 4 seasons. But after that long winter, it's really nice to look forward to some being outside more. And after this last year, it feels extra special, I think. I agree. We've all made it through, right? With most of our sanity intact in here. And also thank you to the library. All of you know how wonderful everyone is over here, and it's always such a pleasure to do these with you all, so thank you so much. Okay, so let's chat some varieties. I know everyone's got their favorites. Tulips might be your favorite spring flower. Peonies might be Elizabeth's favorite spring flower. She had them in her bridal bouquet. I did. Which, interestingly enough, she got married in the fall. So spring, the cut flower world and the gardening world are similar in a lot of ways when it comes to availability and seasonality, but they're really drastically different in most ways. The reason most likely that Elizabeth was able to have peony in her bridal bouquet in fall is because it's spring in the southern hemisphere when it's fall for us. So somewhere in the southern hemisphere in spring, they were growing peonies and then were shipped to her wholesaler and her florist. So, the cut flower world is truly a global industry. And sometimes I feel a little bit like a broken record when I talk about this. So if you've heard me talk about this, I apologize, but I still, after 20 years of being in this business, I still geek out on this. But when you walk into a florist and you see their cooler filled with flowers, those flowers are literally from all over the world. Domestically, most of the year, my product comes from California, but my lilies are grown in Canada, obviously in a greenhouse, hothouse, but that's where my lilies come. Your roses come from South America, mostly Ecuador. You've all heard me talk about the Holland Flower Exchange, and all year long, they are a huge distributor of flowers that they source locally and throughout the world. But my Lisianthus is from Israel. I've got flowers from France, obviously from Holland. My favorite sweet pea come from Japan. So we have some sweet pea here. These are not the Japanese sweet pea, but they're still just as lovely. So really, when you're considering, sometimes I'll sit down to a meal too and think about, if you're, a mindful practice, you're thinking about how many people helped get this dinner made for you, from every single farmer to the grocery store workers, the delivery people. We really are all connected, and the flower industry reminds me of that as well. So,
can you ask a question?
Yeah.
How do they ship the flowers?
So customs at like JFK, for example, is a big deal for flowers because they all get shipped in overnight, especially the ones from Europe, from Holland. They all get shipped in overnight, and then really early flights, they land in the morning, and then they get distributed with the wholesaling companies. So it's a big
like
process.
buckets of water, or
they come in boxes. So large boxes. Packaging for certain flowers is all different. Hydrangea, for example, they just cannot handle being out of water. So every stem arrives with a little tiny baggie wrapped in a rubber band of water that keeps it hydrated at the stem. So, yeah, it's you know, there's lots of cardboard. At least we recycle, but they tend to come in boxes.
Okay.
And then, you know, seasonally, more locally, if there's local farms and things, they'll just come to me in bunches. Okay. These tulips, they're my favorite Dutch style tulip. However, they're grown in a farm in New Jersey. They're my favorite tulips, Van Dyke Farms. So really, the flowers come from everywhere.
Has the Northeast started producing flowers yet, or are we still too early in spring?
It's a little early for anything that's grown outdoor. I mean, there are hothouse growers that grow things, but our local, like very micro local season is not really until later spring and late summer. Local lilac will start coming in bloom, and then the wholesalers will get them from growers further south and work their way up north as the season progresses. So, you know, Delaware area, and then all the way up to as north as Maine for like local lilac. Okay. So yeah, it's all checks and balances and timing and all of that stuff. So pretty soon, folks will be seeing tulips popping up in their yard, hyacinth. You know, crocus are usually first, and crocus are really never used in cut floral. They're so tiny and they're so fleeting, but. So we've got some hyacinth that we're going to work with today. You'll see I love the muscari here, the little grape hyacinth. If you can see these guys, they're so delicate and sweet. And they have such a pretty like pale blue lavendery color. Good texture. So, and the hyacinth are super fragrant, as everyone knows. They're not and everyone has their preferences, right? They're not my favorite fragrance. I can handle them in small doses, but some people love them. Peony always have a soft, pretty fragrance. So we're going to be working today with some peony. I have white and these coral. I have white that we'll work with, and these coral charm. And the coral charm, they're so amazing because they come, you know, you've seen, or the peonies in your yard, they come with these almost like timpani drumsticks, you know, they're really tight and they open, but these, they start even darker in color, a deeper pink coral. And as they open and as they age in the vase over a week or two, they fade in tone. And so at the last of its stages, it'll be like a pale peach, almost cream color. It's really fascinating to watch them age, as it were, in a vase. So an interesting thing when designing with spring flowers, particularly tulips, hyacinth do this, ranunculus, even the anemone here, they grow and stretch even after they're cut off the plant. So if you've ever had an arrangement, made, or you've made one where it's maybe that low compact style where the stems are all sort of similar in height and it's lushly filled, if there's tulips in it, a couple days after you've had it, the tulips have grown at least an inch or two, so they're kind of sticking out like bunny ears. All you really need to do is, you know, twist them out gently from your arrangement and cut an inch off or so, and you can place them back in. But they do. It's so strange, but there's several flowers that do that. You know, like I said, they are fleeting. Spring flowers are beautiful, but they're not the longest shelf life, or they don't last as long as other summer hardier flowers tend to. Doesn't mean you don't want to use them because they are still so beautiful, but they are not as long lasting. So that's something to consider. But if you're wanting something a little longer lasting, you can do fun spring things like, can you see these guys? I'll bring this one over. You can get wheatgrass. So I just found a low container like this, and I'll show you how the wheatgrass comes. It comes in these sheets. You've probably seen them somewhere, but then you can just cut them to size to whatever low container you might have. It could be round, it could be square, it could be rectangle like this. The grass grows just like regular grass, so you just keep it watered. See if it's you know, it's in a little sheet like this. But that's such a fun thing because this will last a lot longer. The grass part will, and it evokes that such fun spring feel. And then the flowers, you can switch out whatever flowers you'd like. I just have these in the little, the water tubes, like the Florist water tubes. So that's a fun thing for Easter. Or
you have a cat. Will they eat the grass? Can they eat the grass?
The cats, I think, are fine with the grass.
Okay.
They can, yeah. In fact, you know, I don't know, they might love it and eat it all. So be careful about that choice. So
Jamie?
fun. Yeah.
Jamie, Cindy's asking, do the small hyacinth smell too?
Oh, the little grape muscari?
Yes.
These little guys, they do not.
Okay.
They don't have a fragrance. So, you know, and that's always something good to know too if you're giving flowers as a gift. If you happen to know your person is allergic to flowers, let your florist know, and then we'll just avoid things that are super fragrant. And that's too if you're designing an arrangement for eating, you know, a centerpiece. You don't want things. I would completely omit hyacinth from any arrangement that's going on a dining table because it overpowers. Yeah, especially as it.
Like I can smell it now, and I'm wearing 2 masks.
Yeah, so
it's going through the mask.
They're very, very fragrant. Things that are softer, like lilac over here, sweet pea, are not as aggressive as a fragrance. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's talk color paletting now too. Okay. You know, color paletting is very subjective. And I'll tell you what I like, but like what you like and do what you like. But in terms of design and what's pleasing to the eye, I think that people think of spring color paletting in 2 different ways. It's either that like really pastel sort of Easter eggy combination, or it can be like bright yellows and oranges and reds, those primary tones. So I like to say, if you're looking sort of in your mind's eye at a wheel of color, if you work within quadrants of similar color, okay, that's where you're going to have a more pleasing sort of
like
look.
Green, blue, purple.
Exactly.
Okay.
So now we'll put some together. So, you know, like I didn't bring any red. Red is the toughest. Red is the hardest color, and if any, you know, all of us ladies out there know to find the right red lipstick for your skin tone is like the holy grail. And if the makeup people stop making that lipstick, you're angry at them because red is so affected by the colors around it. Reds are they're either on that blue spectrum, so the raspberry tones, or they're orangey, right? And they're tough. So reds, I think, look best like if we're talking about within that same color quadrant. And like Elizabeth's wedding flowers were in that jewel tone vibe. So purples, reds, fuchsias, hot pinks. Reds look best like that. You know, if you throw a red in next to a yellow, it's just sort of jarring to the eye. Again, if red and yellow combination is your favorite, just go ahead and do it. But so if we take things like, you know, you can use the softer pale yellows, even if you know, you combine a brighter yellow with a softer yellow, but work it with peaches, oranges. That's a really pretty.
It looks like it's picking up yellow inside.
Yeah, the little pollen in the peony. So those are always things to consider too. The texture, like Elizabeth mentioned, and then that pop of color there, they work well together. Another combination, even using the pale yellows with soft blues, greens, you know, very pale tones like that, creams and whites. If you can see that combination, that looks really pretty together too. And then I think what we're sort of traditionally drawn to in spring are the, you know, the purples, pinks, pinks like that, and even pale blues and creams. So that combination is really pretty together too. But see, if you can imagine, if you were to put a red in here or a bright yellow, it would sort of throw off that vibe. So yeah, I think that the quad, you know, if you imagine every color of the rainbow in a circle in your mind's eye, if you work within, you know, pick one quadrant, you know, that those will work well together next to one another. So, all right.
So you don't necessarily want to do like contrasting colors.
Yeah, you can. It's just your eye will immediately go to that brighter opposite option, and you sort of just are focusing on that. So in terms of design aesthetic too, you know, for weddings or events or things like that, when you're really trying to evoke a vibe or a feel. Right. But if you like the color combination, you just are bringing home flowers to your home, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Okay. Yeah.
Jaime?
Yeah.
Just to go back to the wheatgrass, one person's asking, where can you purchase it? And the other person's asking, from Jaime, okay. And the other person is, how small an amount of wheatgrass can you buy? Does it have to be a whole tray?
No, it doesn't. Just give me a buzz at the Gardener Center. You can even bring in, thank you. You can even bring in your container. You can, my email should be linked here too with you guys at some point maybe, or call us over there if you want to send a picture of the container you have, but probably best if you have a low container, bring it in to me and then we'll just cut to size, you know, what you need.
Perfect.
So yeah, I get the trays from my wholesaler and that size tray. So we can cut whatever to shape you need.
Thank you.
But that, I mean, it's so fun. The grass just, it feels fun in spring. It does. Okay, so let's make a couple things, and we're gonna do a couple different mechanic styles. Okay. So I try to avoid as best as I can that green Oasis floral foam. I try to avoid using it. It's just, they do make it now so that it's biodegradable, but it takes a really long time, and there are chemicals and things in it for preservation that I just don't like. I love using. Also, flowers last a lot longer in water than they do in that foam. So there's a couple ways to get around using it if you're using a low container. I mean, you've seen me use clear vases, and I'll wrap a leaf on the inside if you want sort of a sleeker look so that you're not seeing all the stems going into the clear vase. So everyone has hosta leaves eventually later in their yard. Those are great to just snip one and wrap inside a clear glass vase. That works. You don't even need to use frogs or anything like that. You can just tape a grid. So everyone has, you know, Scotch tape. This is my clear Florist tape, but it's essentially Scotch tape. So I do sell it in this 1/2-inch size, and then I sell it in a skinny 1/4-inch size as well. I'm going to ask Elizabeth, would you like to do something more tall, a little taller and looser and airy, or something more lush and compact?
I will do
lush and compact. Okay. And so what we're going to do, and this is an opaque container, so that's easy. You don't have to worry about lining it with anything. But you just take your tape. I'll take this for you. And one of the times I did a demo here, I cut my hand. So I wasn't paying attention. I cut myself. So I'll try not to do that this time.
No bleeding on set, please.
Yes, bleeding, yeah, that's never good.
So we've got 3 pieces of tape going across
Yep.
the top.
So you'll do one direction. You want to give yourself at least like an inch or half an inch of space. And then you just do the opposite side, so you're creating a grid. And this essentially acts like a frog would, or
Can you tell me what a frog is? I'm
yes,
sorry, I don't actually.
yes. So they're really heavy. They're kind of, you know, people still use them, but they're very, very heavy weighted metal.
Okay.
And then they're different diameter discs that you can place inside your container, and they have these sharp metal prongs. So when you put the flower in, it sort of holds it up.
Oh, it's like a.
There's like a really tight grid of almost like, what are those, bed of nails?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But a very tight
Okay.
woven.
Huh.
And so that holds the flowers up. But I also, that's another thing with the frogs, are that you're sort of clogging up the bottom of the stem. Oh yeah, Amanda's got a picture of one. You're filling the stem that drinks the water with some of that metal. So I think it compromises the ability for the flowers to get enough water. And it doesn't hold them all. It's kind of like once you get enough into the frog, then you can, it creates support. Yes, then they're holding each other up. So I did the 3 across, 3 the opposite direction, and then I taped around the lip too, just to secure the tape down. And then we're gonna fill with water. And when you're, cool water is just fine. Doesn't need to be warm or super cold.
Do you have to put flower food in it, or is just water fine?
Water, if you have some, those packets that we give out, that's fine. You don't necessarily need it. I think the best thing is to change the water out every couple of days.
Okay.
And it's easy too, if you're designing this way with the tape, when you bring it over to the sink, just kind of hold your flow. But this will hold them all up. Just dump all the water out and replace it with fresh every couple of days.
Not just top it off, but actually.
Yeah,
brand new
fully
water.
replace it. Because, bacteria gathers in the water. That's what, it starts to deteriorate the flower, the bacteria that builds up in the water. And that can be from anything, but, the stems, your tools, whatever. But if you change out the water every couple of days, that helps. So I'm going to make one in this container. So this is like a footed pedestal. It's low. So I'll kind of create mine with a little movement and, drip to it. But what I've done, so instead of putting the floral foam in there and instead of taping mine, this is a different way you can do it. This is just chicken wire. Can you see it? It's hard to see. There we go. Yeah. So I took about like 1.5 foot piece. The kind I have is on a roll that's about 1.5 foot wide as well. And then I just sort of shaped it into a little bit of a ball that's the size of my container so that it will just easily fit right in. So that's all we need to do. I'm going to fill with water. So those are my simple mechanics for something low like this. And again, if your container is clear, I would want to line it first with a leaf of some kind.
So you're not looking at.
So you're not seeing the chicken wire.
And we're not going to be able to see any of the chicken wire or the tape once we're done.
Once you're done, if you do it right, you shouldn't see any of that. So, okay. So we'll do yours sort of low and compact. Like I said, we'll do mine sort of loose and airy. We'll start with yours. We're going to fill in. I'm going to give you some greenery. We're going to try to put a little, I tend to start around the lip of the container first, fill in a little bit. One thing with the spring flowers, they're very delicate stems. They're soft stems for the most part. Lilac is a woody stem, hydrangea is a woody stem, but the rest, I mean, you know, your tulips, everything else is, peonies have a sturdier stem, but if you get too many greens in at first, then you're going to have a hard time getting them in and risk damaging some of the stems. So we're going to go really light on some greenery.
Okay. And with a container this size, how high do I want the flowers to be?
That's a great question. So you want to at least try to double the height of whatever container you're using.
Okay.
Because if you go too low, it looks really squatty and sort of just doesn't look right. And if you go too tall, it looks funny too, like it's too top heavy. So good rule of thumb with any container. So even if you're doing a taller piece, you can go twice as high, but as long as you have that anchor of a taller container. So, you know, just double in height. Okay, you've got your clippers.
Okay.
So I have just some lemon leaf here. Here's a good piece to start. So you can just clip off on the laterals. Right? Yeah. Okay. And I might start putting some greens in mine.
So we're talking about this high, maybe, or a little bit higher.
So, yep, and you know, while you're starting, I would peel off some of the leaves because you only want a little bit of greenery hanging over the lip for something small like this. So don't be afraid to peel off what you need. And then, you know, rule of thumb, sort of like in carpentry, measure twice, cut once, right? For cut flowers, you can leave it longer, but you can never get length back if you cut it too short. So err on the side of caution and maybe cut a little longer and try. And I feel like that's a little too much. Okay. So, you know, you just are kind of wanting to give yourself a little bit of a base around the lip of the container. Lemon leaf is great too because it's nice and sturdy. Yep, so just give it another cut and then go in. So if you're using this chicken wire method, as you start, you're going to want to balance out the placement of your stems. So if you put one on this side, put your next over here and vice versa so that it doesn't tossle out the thing. And eventually the weight of all the flowers in there is going to keep it in. Perfect. Yep, you can manipulate a little too, you know, if you want a leaf hanging over. And then maybe just one or two there in the center, and then we'll start filling in with some flour. Yeah, are there little guys? Yep. All right, perfect. We do have our trash can between us. If you're comfortable using a knife, I mean, you can definitely use a knife. So, you know, in and pull, but be careful with the knives. If you're using clippers, I really like these bonsai clippers. They're very sharp for softer stemmed flowers. And then I have a heavier duty pair too. But it's always a good idea to, when you're cutting, cut at an angle so that you're creating more surface area on that stem to absorb more of the water and keep it hydrated. Yeah, perfect. All right. And then maybe one just here. Okay. Sort of, yeah, with a little bit of height there. And that gives you a little bit of a base. Another thing you can do too, so I have this is Italian ruscus, and while we're not gonna, you know, obviously put that in here, if you cut at portions, so if you give a cut there, right at that base, and then you can pull off some of the bottom stems, so now you've got a shorter piece that you can put in to give a little bit of movement. And you still want to use the remaining stem. So again, just imagine the length that you would like to use and find a joint and cut it there. And if you need to peel off the bottom stem, so you really don't want any stem or flower material in the water, again, that creates more, opportunity for bacteria to build and, sort of deteriorates your flowers quicker.
Okay.
And so we got 3 pieces out of this long Italian ruscus. And ruscus is, it's nice. It's a little more delicate and it's got a little bit of that sort of flowy movement. Okay.
It's beautiful already.
So yeah, it's beautiful already. So I'm gonna let you choose your color palette. So in thinking on that quadrant sort of wheel in your mind, are you wanting to do more purple pinks?
These ranunculus?
Ranunculus,
They're
yes.
so beautiful. I feel like I have to use them, which sort of decides everything else. Right?
Okay. So, and I know you love peony, so we're gonna have to put a couple of those
we
coral
are.
chimes in
Absolutely.
too, and maybe some of that tangerine sweet pea. And so with that sort of monochromatic vibe, if you want, you could do pale blue, which would be really pretty. So we've got some pale blue hyacinth. You could do a little lavender too.
Okay.
Or, like the creams and the greens. Okay. So let's start with these guys first. I like to start with a couple larger focal things first.
Okay.
And this is, we're building this as a 360, so keep that in mind too. You want it to look nice from all angles. But if you get one of these guys in,
Go
and
that way.
the other one slightly lower, you know what I mean, at a different direction,
Okay.
that's a good start there. Keep kind of filling in my.
Is that too close to the edge? Should I aim for it to be more in the middle like that?
That works for that one, and then your next one, I would,
Make higher?
Yep.
Okay.
Maybe like the face of it sort of right up here.
Okay.
Perfect. That's great. Okay. So pale green is sort of that neutral to me. So I think let's put in a couple pale green mini hydrangea
Okay.
to fill it in. And hydrangea is great that way too, in that it's a larger headed flower, so it fills your space.
All right.
So I would maybe, and this is, in this case, when you're working in 3s, think triangles.
Okay.
So,
Like one,
boop, 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 perfect.
All right.
Yep. So, yep, that's too tall, but that's good that you didn't cut it too short at first. I maybe, and 2, when you're thinking, put them in at angles.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So these guys you would put more at an angle. When you're cutting the stem, cut at an angle too. So like really
Even
sharp.
more than that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll show these guys if we want to do. So really as sharp as you can of an angle so that you're exposing all that inner flesh
To the
inside
water.
the stem, and that helps it drink a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah. So there you go. So at an angle like that, you'll put one in here, one in here. You're working in that sort of triangle, and I stole your tool.
Move the vases up a little bit forward.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
There we go. Way too tall, but that's good. That's what you want to do. Because like we said, you can't ever,
Can't grow it
you
back.
can't, right. In that case, you might need to put a water tube in it or something to get it. See, oh, look at how beautiful that already is. And another thing too, if you've ever received flowers, or if you're making something in a low container like this, especially when you can't see through it, you have to be really, conscious of the water level, because as you see how Elizabeth's putting the flower stems in at an angle like that, the bottom of the stem is going to be, hitting up high on the container. So if the water level is not filled all the way, you're going to lose some flowers too early. Maybe
In the middle?
you can do that, or if you get this guy back up there, then yeah, then you've got your triangle. Yeah.
What colors are you going to use?
I think I'll do, sort of the lavenders and the pinks, soft greens, creams. I'm just, working in to this chicken wire and trying to balance the stems throughout. So mine will be a little drippier as we go. Okay, so for your next element, we're definitely going to do some of the sweet pea, right?
Yeah.
I would grab 5 of those because they're so delicate.
They're so beautiful.
Yeah.
They remind me, this is going to sound a little silly, of fairies.
Oh my gosh, I get it. I really actually get that. They're little flitty fairies.
Yeah.
So you can either cluster a little bit if you want. You could do like 3 together, or you could really separate them out and put them through and, give yourself a little bit of, even though you are still doing sort of a low and lush, these give that ethereal fairy-like feel. Yeah. So, you can place them throughout.
Okay.
I've seen, and I'm constantly at my desk just spinning my arrangement around as I make it. Mm-hmm. I have seen some designers use the spinny cake.
The cake wheel?
Yeah, I should get myself one of these.
Every time I see someone use one of those, I'm like, that's how you ice a cake. Like, you need the spinning wheel.
Yeah, those for sure with that smooth sort of.
We'll upgrade our supplies for next time.
Yeah. Oh, see, look how pretty that is already.
I think of where I need more pink. Like if I want them to be. These are very hard to cut, these stems.
They are, and that's where, like, if you want to try these are the bonsai snips for really soft.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
That's a lot better.
Like, it's I
was kind of like rimming them with the regular colors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
It's perfect. And then maybe get this guy in over here. Great. So,
One left.
wherever you're feeling it. And she can come out this way or fill in the center. And you can always, adjust angles. So let's see. We're definitely going to put in some of these ranunculus for you. Let's get the biggest. Look at that guy. That's so pretty. It's beautiful. So we'll do, working in 3s is always a good idea, or, uneven numbers. The peonies are so large and focal. 2 is fine. Even 1 sometimes if you've got it in the right placement, especially if it's like a front facing. Mm-hmm. It does give impact sometimes if you cluster things, so you could, especially if you were going to keep it sort of front facing or on a table that maybe people aren't going to see the back so much. That's a fun, and you can see on the screen there how it looks fun, especially low at the base. So if you wanted to try to do that one over here, and I just, again, think triangle because you don't want them all you don't want them all at the same exact level either. So even when you're working with a low and lush style, that really, really paved bridal bouquet look. Yeah. But in an arrangement, it's nice to have some that are down a little lower. It just adds a little interest. Yeah. So if you kind of created a cluster like that, with like slightly varied heights, maybe stick them right in there, and then we'll turn it around and show that one. Yeah. Okay. What am I going to grab here? I think I'm gonna do, you know, like the pale blues, greens, lavenders. So I have some light blue hydrangea. Those are long. Actually, that kind of works. I would just maybe
Switch them, right? The super long
yeah,
guy.
or just take this one and cut it a lot shorter and so that it's sort of at the base. And then we'll turn it around and show them. Yeah, perfect. That works great. Yeah, her cluster there. So that's a nice focal point, especially like I said, if you're going to keep it a little front facing. She keeps wanting to move on you. And this guy is out a little too far. So if you've hit that point where like, oh, I need to make this shorter, twist as you pull out. If you pull, just pull directly, you risk like ruining the whole shape. So twist and pull gently, and I'd cut off a good. Oh, all right. Mm-hmm. All right. There you go. And then in at a good angle. Perfect. Yeah. And then let's see. We have what would we do to finish that off? You can do a little bit of an opposite color, like a pale yellow, if you'd like. You could also use some of this Muscari to give it a real sort of textury Eastery. We're getting nods of yes.
You're getting close. All right.
And these are really delicate. So even just like the tip of you know, if you need to pull something out, you can twist as you go in. Okay. So, and these are fun clustered in groups of threes. Yeah. So you could do 3, 3, 3 in a triangle. My guy, I'm gonna start with the big chunky stuff first. So 2 large hydrangea. I'm gonna grab some of the mini green. And mini green hydrangea, for the most part, is just immature white hydrangea. So they cut it when it's really young to give that soft green look. I know some of you know my tip with hydrangea, but especially if you're cutting out of, this is how I process hydrangea when it comes into the store, every piece, except for some of the larger, really delicate Dutch hydrangea that you've seen in those deep, deep purples and reds and things. I don't necessarily do it, but your workhorse hydrangea, they all come in before they get processed at the bottom of their stems. The heads are soaked in like a, you know, completely submerged for like 15 or 20 minutes.
In water?
In water.
Okay.
Because they drink from their petals just as much as they do their stem.
Oh,
and it will create a much longer lived hydrangea for vase life if you do it that way. Because if they're processed the right way, hydrangea should last you at least a week in a vase. And I think that they tend to not be processed the right way. And even if you have some in a vase that are, you know, that you did do that process with and they've been in for a week and they start getting that soft, limpy feel, do it again. Take them out, soak the heads for 20 minutes and you'll get a couple more days out of them. I love it. It's so pretty.
Am I
I'm
missing
going to put something
right
there.
Here, right?
And, yep. So maybe another hydrangea. You could also have this beautiful viburnum as such a spring, fun to fall. If you want to put some of that in, it's really delicate and pretty. Okay. I'll put a piece in too. When you're working with these little pedestal vases, you really can, you know, work outside of the container where you're getting a little bit of drip and hang since it's already lifted off the table. and get her in a little bit more, maybe a little shorter. Yeah, twist and pull out. I would maybe cut her right about there. Okay. And you can sort of push her in a little bit as you. Perfect. Here we go. Get in there. I love it.
Oh.
Now look how pretty that is. It's perfect. Little spring bouquet. And that little pop of blue.
This guy fell out. That was
Yeah.
okay. The blue is beautiful.
Yeah. And that's too, texture is a big thing for your eye. The Muscari has that different texture. So when you're gathering flowers for an arrangement, you want to think of some that are round, some that maybe have a little bit of length. The sweet pea is such a different shape. Some that will fill in your space for you like the hydrangea does. Hyacinth is fun too, texture-wise, because it's such a mass of all these little star-shaped flowers. So that's a lot of fun too.
Jamie?
Yeah.
Peter's asking, while every arrangement is obviously priceless, what would Elizabeth's arrangement cost for materials?
So retail, just off the top of my, and here's the thing, size doesn't necessarily, indicate price, because peony are a much more expensive flower than, say, the Muscari, the Grape Hyacinth. So peony retail, depending on the season and the time of year, they can run anywhere from $8 a stem to $15 a stem. So ranunculus, if they're the standard ranunculus, they can be in that $5 per stem range, or the Clunies from France can run $10 a stem. So it varies, but on average, something size-wise like this, you'd be looking if you were to purchase one at a florist, in that $60 to $85 range. So
Great.
tips to also save a little, I'm all about recycling. So even if you're wanting a gift for someone, if you have vases sitting around the house that you want to get rid of, or a cash cow or something like that, we're happy to build in your containers. Or if you're having a party and you have containers that that saves you on that too. So, and always just, let us know what your budget is. We can always find flowers that aren't in that $15, dollar range to keep things in the right price point.
Great.
An average.
And Jamie,
Yes.
Kathleen's asking, do you have tips on keeping hydrangeas from weeping?
So that's what I was just talking about. Yes. Especially if you're cutting them out of your yard, or you're purchasing stems wherever, grocery store or a florist. Like I said, the way I process hydrangea when it comes to me in the boxes from the growers, they're always packaged with their stems wrapped in a little baggie of water, because hydrangea are dramatic, let's say that. They need their water. Some flowers can handle being out of water for a while. Hydrangea is not one of them. So, but they also drink from their petals the same as they do from their stems. So bring them home, fill up your sink, or if you have a clean bucket, fill it up halfway or 3/4 and submerge the heads of your hydrangea fully. I know it seems weird and scary, but completely submerge the heads of the hydrangea and let them soak up water through their florets, through their petals, for at least 15 or 20 minutes. Take them out, shake them off really good. That's when you want to give another fresh cut to the stem at a really sharp angle. You want to expose all that sort of white fleshy stuff that's in the center of the stem, and directly in cool, clean water. And that will, your hydrangea will last longer that way, but you can also do it again after they've been in the vase. But hydrangea processed that right way should last you a week at least. In your yard, it's a little different because they're not cultivated to be a cut flower, so they might last a little less. But try that tip, soak the heads of the hydrangea.
Great.
Hydration.
And Cindy's asking, don't the leaves hiding the stems in a vase create the bacteria in the water?
Yeah, that's interesting too. So that's where you would really want to change the water out frequently, every other day or so. I also use this great, it's like a ribbon that is an aspidistra leaf pattern. So I'll use that. It looks just like a leaf on the inside. So we have that at the store that you can use. But, you know, yes, in theory, but that's when you would really want to change the water out frequently. So it's like that balance between the aesthetic and the longevity.
And Tracy's saying that she heard that you can use a drop of bleach in the water to help with bacteria.
You can, very sparingly. In a sense, that's just, yes, that's keeping the bacteria at a minimum. We also have that Floral Life food packets at the store too, which has a little bit of antibacterial, antiseptic properties and food for the flowers, which I believe is just like a bit of sugar. So you could do a little bit of sugar and a tiny little bit of bleach too. That you know, that works for home for sure. But very sparingly. So I'm filling this one in with lilac. I'm going to try to get something here as I'm looking through the camera to a little something drippy. And I love how tulips end up with a little bit of curve like that. And then as they stretch, then they start poking straight up. They're the goofy tulips. But you can just always go back in and just adjust. But that one right now has the perfect shape for that spot. I think let's put in some hyacinth and maybe some of this cream peony, and then we're going to have a pretty spring palette here.
Beautiful.
The hyacinth, again, very soft stem, so I think I'll switch to my bonsai snips.
And where can you get those?
Online. I purchased mine online, and I love this. It shows the brand, but the red and white handled ones, if you can find them on Amazon, I love these guys. I actually had this pair for 10 years, so never had to sharpen them, never. And they get used 5 days a week or more, so.
If you get a hyacinth where it's planted, so you know they sell them that way too.
Yeah.
Can you plant it in the ground, or is it like a one and done kind of flower?
Absolutely. So, you know, too, when your containers, you know, so if you were to purchase some of the already bulbed containers like the daffodils, the tulips, the hyacinths, anything like that, and use them in your pots, then plant those bulbs in the landscape and they'll come back up next year. I mean, traditionally people, you know, if you're purchasing new, right, Tracy sells those in the fall because you want to at least get them in the ground before the winter. So that's when those come in. And right now she's got dahlia bulbs for sale that you get in the ground now, and then they're going to pop up in the late summer and early spring. Okay. So dahlias are another beautiful seasonal.
They're the kind of like spikier looking ones. Right?
They're round, like, I mean, they're yeah, so many different colors and shapes, multifaceted petals. So they're a lot of fun, but they're like, I feel like they're the fall counterpart to a peony in a way. And then I'm going to put some of these creamy peony in, and I think we've got this. I mean, this would be so perfect for a luncheon at your home, or a centerpiece, or a baby shower, or Passover, or Easter. So. And just where, you know, you just fill in, but that's another tip, to work one variety at a time. Because I think, you know, you might, if you're building your own and you get a bunch of flowers home and you lay them all on the table, resist putting one of this in and one of this at a time. If you work one variety in at a time, then you can place them where you want and then see where you need the pop of color or the or another shape. So. All right, that's our little, that color palette.
So
So
beautiful.
feels like spring. Spring
Does
has
feel like
sprung.
spring.
And this is gorgeous. You did an awesome job.
Thank you. I mean, I had a lot of help, but thank you.
Oh, you did great. So I'd love if there are any more questions. I don't know what time we're at, but.
There's one more question about hyacinths. Can they be hyacinth bulbs? Can they be reused?
Yeah, that was what Elizabeth was just asking. Yes. So, I mean, not as far as cut flowers go, no, because they're already cut off the bulb. But if you were to, purchase them from a garden center like ours, already potted, use them in your land, if you get them in the ground, they're going to bloom and then they'll bloom again next year. But if you're using them.
That's it. Okay, so they will bloom again the following year.
Yes.
Good,
all
good.
Of the bulbs will. You just have to make sure you get them in your landscape. You could plant them in right after they're done blooming in the spring, as long as you get them in like in the fall, because they want that. They sort of do that weird dormancy. They need that cold snap in the ground over the winter for them to produce again the next year. Yeah.
Now, if you have hyacinth or tulips or sort of a spring flower planted in the ground, can you cut them and not hurt the plant?
Of course. Okay. If you want to cut them and use them as an arrangement inside the house, go ahead and do that, and then they'll bloom again next year. They're not going to bloom again
this year.
So
you've ruined your garden, but you brought flowers this year.
I always, I'm in apartment living now, but when I owned my house, I mean, I would always sort of time it. I would enjoy certain things in the ground, and then I would know, okay, well, they're going to look good for another week or more. If I want, I'll cut these and bring them in and enjoy them in the house for a week or so. Okay. Again, spring flowers are so fleeting, so you got to catch them really quick when they're outside in your yard. But, I love if foraging. I always tell folks, get your greenery in your yard. Like I said, hosta leaves. Your forsythia. Forsythia is abundant in our area, so that's going to pop. That looks gorgeous in a vase, and they need pruning every twice a year. Yeah, exactly. So enjoy it in your house if you can. That's always a nice thing to do, because really, even myself as a florist, I'm around flowers all the time. I'll bring home a bundle every week or so, or every other week, because it really brightens up your space. It's nice to have beside method thing. Any other questions?
That's all on our end.
Okay, great.
Thank you all, Jaime. This was wonderful. And possibly you'll come back and help us do something for Mother's Day.
Yes, we'll figure something out.
Great.
You guys, so.
Thank you.
All right. Happy spring, everybody.
Bye.